What do you make of this?
7 ancient structures that shouldn't exist, and most of the world has never heard of them.
Yes, but it doesn't
What you are about to
match the
discover
sources
is not the
markers
Great
we
Pyramid or
have.
Machu Picchu, which have already been studied and photographed to exhaustion. We're talking about structures so bewildering, so impossible, and so systematically ignored that their existence defies not only ancient engineering, but the very chronology of human civilization itself. We begin in the Sudan Desert, in Nabta Playa, with a discovery that silently changed the paradigm of everything you believe you know about ancient astronomical observations. Here, about 7,000 years ago, 1,000 years before Stonehenge was built, an unknown civilization erected an astronomical observatory of a precision that rivals modern instruments. It was not a temple. It was not a decorative monument. It was a complex of stones aligned to track the movement of the star Sirius with a margin of error so small that contemporary astronomers had to perform advanced calculations to confirm the accuracy. A civilization that supposedly lived in nomadic conditions in the middle of a desert built an observatory that would be too sophisticated even for the Egyptian civilizations that came after. And here is the detail that no one mentions. The Egyptians knew of Nabta Playa. Their inscriptions and records of expeditions prove this, but they never reconstructed the observatory. They never attempted to replicate it, not because they could not, because they did not understand how it worked. Modern archaeologists discovered at the same location artifacts of worked meteoritic iron, a metal that the ancient Egyptians did not extract from the earth, but from the sky. The implication is disturbing. This civilization not only observed the stars, but had access to materials that came from space. The problem is that no one knows who built this. There are no records, there are no hieroglyphs, there is no explanation. The second structure takes us even further back in time to Turkey, where Göbekli Tepe remains perhaps the most disturbing archaeological discovery of the last 30 years. Found in 1994 and excavated since 2010, this site contains temples and ceremonial structures that date back 11,500 years. Before agriculture, before the domestication of animals, before anything we call civilization. Stone pillars more than 7 meters high, some weighing between 10 and 15 tons, were erected and aligned with astronomical precision by a society that, according to conventional narrative, should be composed only of primitive hunter-gatherers. The problem that archaeologists face is deeper. These pillars were not transported from a nearby quarry. They were brought from a distance of up to 15 kilometers across mountainous terrain 11,500 years ago. Each pillar would have demanded a coordinated force of several hundred people, which would mean that this primitive society possessed the capacity for mobilization, communication, and logistical planning equivalent to a modern army. But there is something more disturbing. When you examine the sculptures on these pillars, you find figures that are clearly humanoid, but with characteristics that do not align with human anatomy. Some scholars discreetly call them winged figures. Others avoid the discussion entirely. Not only were they transported from distant quarries, but they were sculpted with elaborate reliefs depicting animals, humanoid figures, and geometric symbols. How did a community of hunter-gatherers, without permanent settlements, without writing, without any sign of technical sophistication, manage to organize itself enough to transport megastructures and create monumental art? The answer that conventional archaeology offers is simply insufficient. On the third stop, we arrive at the islands of Malta, where the temples of Gantija silently defy understanding of how megalithic construction worked. Dating from approximately 3,600 years ago, these structures present coralline limestone blocks that were fitted with a precision that makes them seem like ceramic tiles rather than one-ton stone blocks. But the detail that makes these structures truly impossible is that they appear to have been made with tools that do not yet exist in our historical account. The blocks display saw marks, clean cuts, and a finish that suggests a high-speed rotary tool, exactly as we see in modern equipment. In 1988, a British engineer examined these marks under 40 times magnification and published his findings in a specialized journal. His conclusions were simple and undeniable. The marks could only have been created by a tool that rotated between 3,000 and 5,000 revolutions per minute. A modern grinding wheel operates at 3,600 revolutions per minute. The engineer discreetly suggested that the dating of Malta could be wrong. His academic career never recovered. The article was widely ignored. But the marks remain there, eroded into the stone, indifferent to academic skepticism. Scholars of Malta discreetly discuss this anomaly, but few venture to openly question how this was achieved with stone technology. The fourth structure is the Saqqara well, a perfect cylinder carved into solid rock in ancient Egypt with a depth that defies the logic of manual excavation. At about 30 meters deep and with perfectly cylindrical walls, this well was sculpted with such absolute precision that in 1945, when modern engineers examined it, they found that its diameter varies less than 15 centimeters throughout its entire depth. To create such a structure with primitive copper tools would require a depth control that the Egyptians theoretically did not possess. But the Saqqara well is not an archaeological accident. In 1944, during an excavation, engineers discovered that the well was magnetically aligned with a precision that deviates only 0.2 degrees from true magnetic north. This is more precise than 16th century compasses. Not only was it excavated with impossible mechanical drilling, it was oriented to a specific direction. The purpose? Unknown. The Egyptians never documented anything about its use, its function, or who built it. It is as if they had forgotten, or deliberately erased, the memory of its existence. This is not a metaphor. Linguistic studies of Egyptian hieroglyphic texts reveal something bewildering. There are periods of Egyptian history where specific techniques are mentioned in detail in inscriptions. And then, generations later, they disappear completely from the records. There is no gradual evolution. There is no logical transition. It is as if a page had been torn out. The clearest example is the precision technique in construction, obsessively mentioned in the Old Kingdom, completely absent from Middle Kingdom documentation, and then mysteriously readopted centuries later as if it were a new discovery. The Academy calls this a gap in the record. But what if it is not a gap? What if it is historical censorship? We then advance to Tiwanaku in Bolivia, where the gateway known as the Gate of the Sun represents something that oscillates between impossible engineering and artistic expression of an unsettling sophistication. This gateway, made of a single block of andesite stone, weighs approximately 10 tons and is decorated with 48 geometric figures carved to a uniform depth of 3 centimeters. Each figure, each line, each detail was sculpted with a consistency that suggests not only specialized tools, but also prior digital design. The mathematical patterns present in the Gate of the Sun reflect knowledge of golden proportions and sequences that should not be known by a pre-Columbian civilization. In 2001, a Peruvian mathematician fed the patterns of the Gate of the Sun into a computer and applied a sequence recognition algorithm, the same algorithm used to detect patterns in genetic code. The results were disturbing. The gate was not merely decorative or calendrical. Its geometric patterns encoded information. Specifically, they encoded dates. And one of them was the date of a solar eclipse that would not occur again for more than 300 years. The study was never published in major journals. The mathematician changed research fields. But the gate remains there, in Tiwanaku, silently encoding messages that no one should be able to decode. Deeper analyses reveal that the gate may have also functioned as an astronomical calendar, with its patterns aligned to specific celestial phenomena. The sixth structure belongs to ancient Iran, where the Qanat systems, underground aqueducts, represent a feat of hydraulic engineering that remains incompletely understood. These tunnels, some more than 200 kilometers long, were excavated at such a precise gradient that water flows continuously by gravity without any point of blockage or stagnation. To build such a structure without modern measuring instruments, the builders would have needed an understanding of hydrology, geometry, and engineering that anticipated by centuries the formalized discoveries of modern science. Some of these systems have functioned continuously for more than 2,500 years, which raises the disturbing question: how was knowledge of this magnitude acquired and then largely forgotten? The answer that archaeology offers is too simple to be true. It was developed through trial and error over centuries. But there is a detail that completely undermines this narrative. The oldest known qanat in Iran date from approximately 1000 before Christ. But similar structures were found in Jordan with dating of 8,000 years before Christ, simultaneously in regions separated by thousands of kilometers. The possibility of independent developments is statistically unlikely. The implication is clear. Someone taught this technology. Someone disseminated knowledge of advanced hydraulic engineering between separated civilizations. The question that the Academy avoids asking is, who? And finally, the seventh structure, the underground cities of Cappadocia in modern-day Turkey. They are not small caves. They are entire cities carved into rock with interconnected chambers, ventilation systems that maintain stable temperature, perfectly proportioned stairs, and centuries of stratified occupation. The city of Derinkuyu descends more than 80 meters underground through multiple levels, with the capacity to house thousands of people simultaneously. What makes these cities truly impossible is that not only were they excavated with geometric precision, but their fresh air systems were calculated with a sophistication that would only be equaled by modern air conditioning engineering. The ventilation openings in Derinkuyu create a continuous airflow that keeps the lower levels breathably cool, something that requires sophisticated calculations of air pressure and volume that should not be known in that era. In 2003, a modern HVAC engineer, one who designs air conditioning systems for buildings, simulated on computer the airflow in Derinkuyu using the actual architectural data. His conclusion left the archaeology community in silence. The calculations executed by the builders of Derinkuyu were so close to physical ideals that any significant adjustment would impair efficiency. That is, they not only understood the principles of ventilation, they got it right on the first try. There is no evidence of modifications, adjustments, or periods of correction. Only perfect professionalism. The pattern that connects these seven structures is devastating in its clarity. From Nabta Playa to the wells of Saqqara, from the cities of Cappadocia to the aqueducts of Iran, we find a consistent signature. Precision that exceeds available tools, scale that belies theoretical capabilities, technical knowledge that predates its historical formalization, and academic silence on uncomfortable contradictions. But there is an even more disturbing detail that connects all these structures in a way that archaeologists mention only in private rooms. All were built during periods of extreme climatic transition, changes in rainfall patterns, extinction of megafauna, geographic displacement of populations. As if these structures were desperate responses to an existential crisis, as if someone or some group knew that it would need to preserve knowledge, create refuges, or document critical information before something or someone erased them. This coincidence of periods is not mentioned in academic papers, but when you overlay the construction dates with paleoclimatic data, the pattern is undeniable. These were not merely structures, they were archives, they were bunkers of knowledge. The hidden truth is not a conspiracy, it is a void of explanation. It is the silent admission that the history we were told about how ancient civilizations built their legacies is fundamentally incomplete or profoundly wrong.